Hey, really good to have back the community breakfast in this format with the long tables. It's been really great to see and catch up with old and new members. So I hope you had a good time so far. There's still breakfast, there's still coffee for another hour. So please serve yourself. And we're going to kickstart off with the program. So I'm not going to be taking the stage anymore today. We're going to have Michael from Taival, who's going to be hosting the session today. And we have a great lineup of speakers. I'm really looking forward to be talking about growth strategies more. So the stage is yours, and welcome on stage, Michael.
It's great to see so many people face to face. This is actually the first event face to face that I'm hosting. So it's fantastic to be in the same room with people again. I'm Michael Hanf. I'm one of the co-founders of Taival Advisory. We're basically a company looking at strategy, and we work on the intersection between digital topics like circularity, sustainability, ecosystems. 5 years old, so also still very young. Today we will be talking about strategy, growth strategy, but also about topics like agility, speed, and resilience. We're living in unprecedented times with a level of change, a level of disruption that we haven't seen. There's the climate crisis, there's the pandemic, there's the war going on at the moment, and that's basically hitting all of us on a personal level, but also on a company level. And it becomes more and more difficult for startups, but also for already longer established companies to navigate this world today. And what we've been seeing is that there are two extremes. On one side, you have companies that are focused on a strategy. They set a strategy for the next 5 years, and then they follow that religiously, and they don't budge from that. They just move forward. And then if you have a disruption, you have a problem. You cannot react fast enough. You cannot adjust. On the other side, we see companies, and that's very often in the startup world, that are very agile. They basically pivot every time they hit a roadblock. Every time they hit a roadblock, they say, okay, but now we need to do something completely different. We need to shift. Both of these extremes are not necessarily what you want to do, because on one side, you're not able to react to the changes. On the other side, you're not able to really build where you want to go. And today we will be talking about that. We have 3 great guests. So we will start off with Petri to talk about the power of growth strategy. Then we will hear from Monica about a case example, an example of Enfuse. How have they been going through this process of finding that balance between setting the guardrails, setting this North Star, while at the same time really navigating this world with continuous change. And then in the end, we will go into a panel where then also Terhi from Helen Ventures will join, where we'll hopefully answer all of your questions. So organizationally, we will not have a QA after each presentation, but then we will go to the questions in the panel in the end, and hopefully then have a very active discussion there. Good, then let's start off the program. As said, the first speaker is Petri Salo. He is one of the executive partners and the CEO of Taival Advisory, so one of my colleagues. I've been working with him for many, many years. He will be talking about the power of growth strategy. Petri.
Thank you, Michael. And first of all, really happy to be here sharing my thoughts with you guys. One personal thing, just in case you're wondering, I have this thing called vertigo. So I'm feeling faint, my balance thing is off. So if I'm moving slowly or if I have to sit down, it's harmless, it's just inconvenient. So don't worry about that. So growth strategy. A strategy may not be the word that startups are using too often. And obviously, when you're looking at strategy, growth is not a strategy. I was just before coming here, I was looking at one of the strategies of our clients, a corporate, and the first thing I saw was a bar showing the revenue growth. So that is very important, that strategy is not, growth is not a strategy. Hopefully, it is a result of a successful strategy. And if you think about strategy, the typical things you would see in a strategy is some kind of a purpose for your business, then you obviously need to focus on the most important thing, which is a differentiated value proposition, which means that you really have the formula to solve some problems better than anyone else in the world. And then that's not obviously enough, because you need to deliver on that promise. So you need to have the distinct capabilities as well. So in that sense, strategy is, in my mind, something like that. And I'm not really too strict about strategy, because people go into the debate about what strategy is. So let's not have that debate here today, but talk about the growth and significance of growth for startups and also investors. So that's really what I wanted to talk about. And first and foremost, growth to me is a journey, because you start with less, and if you're successful with your growth, you end up with more. And as a journey, strategy could be like your road plan, the plan of succeeding and reaching whatever destination you are aiming for, or actually ending up in a more preferable destination than you thought first of all. And if you think about the journey of a startup, it is really, and any corporate for that matter, in today's time, which is extremely discontinuous. It is discontinuous for two reasons. First of all, the sort of permanent things that are impacting the environment, the business environment and the physical environment as well, are changing the formula for business. So the rules of business are changing gradually and more rapidly as we speak. The second thing that unfortunately we all have seen is that the world is also facing many crises. So that means that even though you have this long-term phenomena that are gradually changing your business environment, uncovering new value creation opportunities, you also have the short-term crises that may do the same, but they also have the downside impact as well. So you have to navigate those things. But if we look at the growth strategy of a startup specifically, there are distinctly three phases that I typically see, and they need to be treated differently. So this is one of my key messages from a growth strategy perspective to startups, is that be mindful of your stage, so that you're applying the right game plan at that right stage, because you can really mess things up if you are kind of applying wrong approaches at the wrong phase. The first stage of a startup is quite simple to understand. You've got the idea, you start exploring the idea, you start exploring the market, you start finding the product and market fit, and the only aim of this phase is to start getting traction. You start trying to create the pull effect in the market, that there are people out there who really value your ability to solve their problem, and that's really the product market fit that is most important here to make sure. And here the do's and don'ts, if we think about that, is that I've seen quite many examples with the startup people being in the growth frenzy or growth drunk, that they start applying some of the fashionable growth tools already at this point, start talking about growth hacking and stuff like that. And that typically doesn't work, because if you haven't had the traction in the marketplace, if you haven't got the pull from the market, you are too early applying these tools. So spend the time, be mindful of this phase, and make sure that you nail down the product market fit first. And then the second thing I wanted to also highlight here as a do's and don'ts is that make sure also that you spend the time required to tweak your unit economics in shape at this phase. Because if you don't do that, if you kind of let yourself loose and start applying growth and scale, then if your unit economics are off, you will obviously lose money on every transaction. But secondly, and more importantly and more difficult, is that it is really difficult to get that in shape downstream if you've committed to yourself to already the growth path at that point of time. So very important points. I've seen many companies, or some companies, not many companies, who have had really good product market fit, but the unit economics haven't been in place because of maybe missing some logistics capabilities or something like that, and it's really painful to try and fix that downstream. Moving forward, the next phase here is scale. I call it scaling. So this is when you experience the real pull from the market. You have the product and market fit in place. This would be the place to start changing your mindset within your company a little bit. Now you can start applying the growth tools and stuff like that. And you need to also actively kind of shift the mindset from exploring the product market fit into now we locked it in. This is what we do. And let's now try and industrialize our operations and so forth. So that's where you start scaling your business model. So this is where you sit down and make sure that your business model is scalable, and you start actually scaling it, you start learning about it, you use data and so forth. And then you start the virtuous cycles, like you get more customers, you get more data, data improves your product, you get more customers and so forth. And this is also one of the things that is good to stop at and think about the cycles that you've got. I'm sure some of you and many of you do these things, but just sit down and think about the cycles in this phase. So what are the first things to do, how they feed the next cycles, and so forth. And the important thing here is I identify the stages. So the cycles may also go across the stages we were discussing here. So make sure that you also manage the mindset of your team within the cycles and between the cycles as you go from one stage to another, from traction to scaling to expansion. So that's one thing I wanted to highlight as an example. And then the third one here on my sort of thinking is the big bets stage. And this is not just it's going beyond the optimization of the scaling phase. In the scaling phase, we kind of scaled the max out of our existing business model. This is now starting to stretch beyond optimization. This is starting to go look at your product and market adjacencies, if you can expand your offerings and expand your market and so forth. And explore and capture the addressable opportunities there around these adjacencies. And one of the important things here is, again, coming back to the approach and the mindset and so forth. Here you would typically start looking things big, start looking at can we apply some of the corporate style methods like M&A and some other things like that in making big bets. And again, one of the things I failed to mention is obviously from a sort of investing and funding perspective, all of these phases, you will be running your different rounds for different purposes. So that's also very important to understand from an investor point of view in which stage you are at and for which purpose you are looking for the funding and how that funding will then feed into the next stage and provide you with this runway towards the expansion phase of your growth journey. So that's kind of the overall thinking that I had about the growth journey and growth strategy for startups. And let me just summarize this from a perspective, an alignment perspective from what's the role of growth? So growth being the top line growth, the growth in business volume, why is that important? And what is the significance for either the startup or the investor in this case? So first of all, if we look at the investor side of things, obviously an investor is looking to get ROI from the investment. And the ROI can come through two different ways. So it can come through the enterprise value increase that is derived out of the growth of the startup in question that the investor is investing in. So that's a very straightforward thing. But then the ROI may also, from an investor perspective, come through the increase of the enterprise value of the investor itself, if we are discussing a strategic investor who can see that with this new capability or startup, we actually can increase the valuation of our own corporation as well. Then obviously, if we are discussing, again, a strategic investor, the growth may help increase the revenue multiple for enterprise valuation of the investor, because we may be demonstrating new capabilities that behave and scale differently in the marketplace. And of course, these days, it's very important to also recognize the other returns on investment, or returns to other stakeholders, rather. So not only do investors seek for return for shareholder, but also return for other stakeholders like people and planet, that they are important things as well. And they are also gaining sort of significance in market-based valuation models and business models as well. So that's also very important for investors. And then obviously, if we look at the startup side of things, there's obviously the same thing. There's a lot of synergy and alignment. So ROI through the own enterprise valuation of your own company. Obviously, growth will give you better market positioning. That's why growth is important. It will give you access to new markets, new capabilities, access to more data that you can use in evolving your own business and your product, and so forth. And growth is really important because I mentioned the virtuous cycle and the growth loops. Growth is the fuel that the growth loops and virtuous cycle lives out of. So that's very important. So that was kind of my sort of thinking aloud with you guys this morning about why I think, from my perspective, growth is important and how to approach growth from a sort of business planning and strategy perspective, and the alignment of growth as a value driver between the startup itself and the investors. So thank you very much, and happy to take questions, and I'll participate in the panel as well later on. So thank you very much. There's one question.
Well, it's not a question, it's more like a reflection on the... I felt it was really clear with your stages, and also when it comes to the, not only that you need to get unit economics in place before you enter the growth. Actually, what I found earlier was that if you get money too early, I mean, like an investment, like when you're still not at the growth stage, it can actually ruin things because you tend to think that, yeah, we are ahead of what we are, and then you'll end up doing negative unit economics and like spending all the money to different activities, and then you're for sure gonna run out of money, but like without realizing why that happened.
I'm so happy you brought that up because that is one of my favorite topics as well, because startup world sometimes gets a little bit diluted with what is the reason for funding. It's not funding your operational, because that's cash flow thing, obviously, an investment thing, and then operating profit is another thing. You need to keep those separate, and I think this phasing helps you with that, because there's so far as you can go with this mentality that I'm spending to lock in my economics. But once you lock in, then you need to be self-sufficient. So very good point. Thank you for that. All right. Thank you very much. Speak to you later in panel.
Perfect. Thank you, Petri. And Petri will come back to the panel later, as he said. So we will also have a chance to then discuss more. I have a ton of questions, but I hope you also have some. Perfect. Next, we will have Monika Liikamaa from Enfuse. So she's the co-founder and co-CEO. Enfuse is a payment service provider that provides payment and open banking services. Founded in 2016, they have had a tremendous growth story, now having more than 100 employees, more than 16 million end users on their platform. So really tremendous growth, and I'm happy and looking forward to hear the founder story from Monika and how she has been basically navigating the balance between agility, speed, resilience, and basically keeping the course. Monika.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Yes, I'm Monika Liikamaa. I'm 47 years young, mother of 4. So if someone gets up the actual presentation, or do I just push? Oh, the button. Yeah. So these are 2 of my co-founders. We are all bankers. So when we founded Enfuse, we were in many phases already, because we know how to make money, we know how to spend money, we know what compliance means, and we know the problem in the industry because we were the customers of that problem. So, for example, Vesa from Nordea, I'm his customer, but he has really shitty systems, but it's not his fault. We'll talk about those later. So my idea was like, why is it so fucking hard to buy services so that I can launch services to my customers fast? And that's when I was the bank CIO. So I've been part of building S-Bank back in the days. Then I was also heading the card and payments business at Actia before I totally passed out and decided that this has to change. And then Denise and me, we have been working together for 15 years. So she was a young and ambitious Swift and Target payment service specialist at Crosskey when we met. And now I'm her wing woman. So she's really the driver of the growth, and I'm the one who paints with the very big pictures, and then she's like, please shut up and let's do it like this. So when Petri talked a lot about the strategies and how to do it, I'm telling here about how you actually do it. So he's like the nun having sexual education, and I'm actually the one who's doing it. So any questions, please feel free to shoot. I think one of the biggest things that really needs to be there is that you need to know why you exist, because you will be hit by choices every day. And I think then you can talk a lot with nice words about growth hacking and pivoting and all that dibba-dabba. I don't really care, but I remember in 2016, I was like, really? Is Donald Trump becoming a problem to me? And yes, he was. And then it was like, pandemic, this is exactly what I need. And then we just got out of the pandemic, and now we have the war, where we as Finns are very good off. But it's a country risk that we are having. So for us, we founded Enfuse to be the only the player to help anyone wanting to launch anything with digital payments. They need to understand who we are and what our capabilities are. So our first customer was ST1 Finance, and we enabled them to launch Apple Pay in the Nordics. And the only other player that launched at the same time was Nordea, and they used Nets. And that's when the things changed, because people are like, what the fuck? And OP called me and asked, like, Monica, what is this? How many are you? I said, we're 15 in 2017. And the Nets people were 3,000 doing the same thing. So again, if you know what you're doing, do it. But I also understand that the unit economics is really, really important. So our first funding was from Nordea Growth. So we took a loan. We took 3.5 million euros in senior loan and 1.5 million in junior loan, and the only collateral was our company. But it's because the first 2 years of Enfuse, we actually pulled a profit, because we knew what we were doing, and we knew how to do it better, faster, and globally scalable. And I think that's the non-Finnish way. So you need to think big enough. So the vision for us is to be number one, because that's the only way to have an impact. And if you start thinking too small, you're gonna die for many reasons. But one is that you will never get funding, because nobody wanna fund small things. And in a world where there's a lot of money going on, you really need to find the things that it's worth investing in. But it's not just about the money, it's about the purpose. So if you don't have a purpose and you're only there to make the money, you will not either survive the hardships. As we have a saying, shit hits the fan every day. And if there isn't a reason to wake up in the morning and come and do the struggles, so mindset definitely matters. We don't talk about growth mindset or whatever the fancy word. It's about, we have a zero asshole policy in our cultural handbook, and it's about the mindset of having the glass half full or half empty. So if you always come into room, you see the problems and you bitch about them, then we are not the place for you. If you come into the room, you identify the problems, you come with solution, then definitely we are hiring. So again, our mission, vision and purpose are really the key factors that help us in our everyday life. And of course, our goal is IPO. And I just got a question like, why aren't you selling Enfuse? And the answer is very simple. I don't want to be anybody's bitch. So I have seen trade sales. I've been in S-Bank when we bought FIM and when we killed the soul of people. And when they're just sitting there to wait for the 3 years to get an exit. I don't want to be there. I'm too old for that shit. And that's a good track also. If you are the serial entrepreneur, that's fine. But I have only one life, and I want to make it count. So for my children. And that's why we set a target for IPO. The funny thing is that we do exactly the same thing today as we did in June 2016. But we just do it better and faster, and we find the customer who needs us. So a very typical Finnish company is that we have the best tech in the world, and now it's not even my opinion, it's a fact. Because in our Series C, which was the alphabetical you need to put, because we had first our seed funding, which was actually the debt financing, and then we had the A round where we took in Maki, and then we had the small round. So we raised 60 million euros at this point, and we are really focused on growth. And then shit hits the fan, as I said, every day, and we need to adapt. So scenario planning, as old bankers, we are used to having risk assessment, operative risk. We are under the Finnish Supervisory Authority. We're a payment institution ourselves. We enable anyone who wants to issue money and has money to do it. So you don't have to be a banking license owner. We also have the license as a service. So we really package it in a way that we can enable. So if Maria01 would like to issue a payment card, we could do it for you. Of course, with the fact that you actually have money to put there. But that's kind of how it would go. And then for us, of course, it's fun to be part of things. And I do think that networking is really important. And of course, since I like winning awards, it's fun. It's just like confirmation. But in the end of the day, it doesn't matter. So how we drive the growing ship of Enfuse, and when we sent in the material, we were 100. I think we're 130. So this Monday, I came to the office and we have 15 new Enfusers starting. So we are growing, but it's not about growing people just because we have money. It's about we have been working our asses off, and finally we can start scaling with people and diminish the personal risk that we had. So we had a lot of person-dependent risk. And that's why I also think that being the 5 co-founders, it's me and Denise who have always built the company. And then we have the 2 tech guys, Niklas and William. And then we have Tom, our compliance guy. So since we never hate each other at the same time, all of us, you always have, the meddling. So it's really a family, and it's more. But how do we get the people involved? So we decided to start leading the company through objectives and key results. So how do we simplify it in a way that when you wake up in the morning and you know why it is important that you come to work? Because if you don't, I always say don't come to work, because then we've failed as a company. So last year we had our customers loves and praise us, and there was a lot of results under it that we would meet, and as a whole company. So our NPS score, and we are B2B, was 95. Thank you. Because I have never seen that, so that stresses me out, because I don't want to have it any lower. So we are up at 95, so we better keep it there. And how do we do that? This year is our employees loves and praise us, because we understand that they go the extra mile. Since we are here to help our customers succeed, I always say that we carry them over the finish line or we kick them over. Often the project is both. How do we do that faster, more sustainable? We need to have a lot of things when it comes to our employees loving and praising us. So that's one. So we set also some targets with Great Place to Work, just to make sure that since I have a lot of people and I have a lot of managers, that everyone is every day doing more right than wrong. Because, I believe that nobody wakes up in the morning and decides to do shit work, but yet shit happens. So that's what we need to have processes to control. Because the only way to scale big, and we're going to go global, is to have structure. Structure, processes bring speed and agility. And if you think that's not true, then you're wrong, because I've seen it, how it goes. Then, of course, there has to be measurable things. I strongly believe in KPIs, but you get what you measure. So you need to be really careful and have the dialogue of how do we understand things, what are we measuring. So we have now, this year, is double everything. So these objectives are metrics and things to be proven, so that we are on the right path for the IPO. And then we have values. We have had the core values from the beginning of Enfuse. So we decided what kind of company we want to be and what we don't want to be. So think big, probably born a little bit from me. But in the end of the day, for a single developer doing something, think big means that don't just fix the problem today, because next year we're going to have 100 more customers. So how do you scale the thing? And the reason we went into public cloud as the first one in the world to put card payment issuing in a public cloud wasn't because cloud was cool. So in 2016, when my tech guy said, yeah, we're going to go public cloud, I said, no, because no bank will ever buy. And then they were like, but that's the only way to scale globally. And we don't have any money. I said, check, let's go public cloud. And then I took the role of making sure that the Financial Supervisory Authority understands why public cloud is safer and more scalable and cost efficient compared to on-prem data centers. And now everyone is going public cloud. So again, in the payment industry can thank us for that. So being a forerunner means also that we don't pivot out of problems. We kick in the door, because that's more fun, but it's also more painful. Collaboration, when we launched Enfuse, we had 4 or 5 major partners that we were working with, so collaborating. We were the contractor to everyone. So we had Taivals, Gemalto, AWS, these type of small players, listed companies that were our subcontractors. So collaboration is the only way to scale big. If you want to go fast, go alone. I don't believe that either today. But if you want to go big, you need to collaborate. Excellence, we talk about people's money. So as I always said, that we can either do this perfectly well, and of course shit hits the fan some days, but that's when people touch stuff. So automation is really key, SLAs are really key. But then sustainability. For us, sustainability was there from day one, and it hadn't that much to do with green stuff and that kind of. For it was like, I want to be an employer that I want to work for. So we take care of our people. We don't have the glass jar and the Coca-Cola stuff. So like, where do we spend the money? We don't spend the money on pizzas and beer, because I have a life. So, but that's my choice. So if people want to have it, for example, during the pandemic, we were like, how do we make sure that people are healthy in their heads, and how they meet up? So we made these teams that we put a budget on the managers who are servant leaders, that they are there to shovel shit, as we say, and make sure that the team can do their work well. So we gave them a budget. Every month, this is the sum of money, you do whatever you want in your team. And then the team started spending that money to have cross-functional events, like going out in the park, having some pizzas and talking, and stuff like that. Of course, it's different now when we're coming out of the pandemic and starting to see each other. So we had a major milestone 3-4 weeks ago. I don't remember. Like my timeline is different because I work all the time, because for me it's a lifestyle. We went to Levi, because I'm from the north part of Sweden actually, but I'm born to Finnish parents, so I decided to give everyone an experience, because we have 20 plus nationalities, and English is the only thing you need to know and not be an asshole to work at Enfuse. So I took them to Levi and gave them the Arctic experience. Not gonna do that again. It was an epic journey, cost shitload of money compared to anything we've done before. And it will remain in the books of history, but not going to do that again. So just to give you a little bit of the idea of what we're doing, is that these are a set of our customers. So we enable everyone to issue payment methods that are used in the everyday life of people. Finns have a really hard time buying from Finns, and I knew that. So that's why we went global. Immediately, because otherwise we wouldn't be here. So Finns don't buy from Finns because they think it's more shinier if they buy from the Danes or something else, which is not true, but that's just a mental fuck up. But then we have customers like Pleo is our B2B unicorn. Rocker is really growing fast in Sweden. ST1, our first customer, who we did the most complex product that we have, revolving credit, installments, fleet and fuel. And then for Rabobank, which is a big Dutch bank, we enable My Carbon Action. But I think that Jessica is trying to start clapping, so that I will shut up. So, time's up. Thank you. Any questions? You can do it later. Se oli siinä, nyt saa taputtaa. Juhu!
Could I ask all the panelists to the stage? We'll now start with the panel discussion. You met Petri, you met Monica already, but we have a new face on stage here, Terhi. Terhi is head and founder at Helen Ventures. Helen Ventures is part of Helen, that I guess most of you know, one of the biggest Finnish energy companies. But why don't you briefly introduce yourself and what you do at Helen Ventures?
So Helen Ventures, we are all about climate tech and the energy transition. So we are very focused on a certain area of investment. We invest into the early phase of startups. We want to see the companies who are actually going to change the world. So we have a lot of people who talk about climate change or talk about things, sustainability, but it's not about talking, it's about doing. We want to have and back those companies across Europe. So we invest across Europe plus Israel, so not only here. We invest in the early phase, so we go into the companies in the plus minus Series A, you could say. We invest up to 3 million euros. And we typically want to be pretty active in working with these companies. We have now 7 portfolio companies, of which only one is in Finland. So it's a company called Virta, working on the e-mobility space. And then we have companies mainly working in, you could say, 3 e-mobility companies. Then we have companies which are looking at AI into district heating, and what they actually do is lower the carbon emissions in the system by making the system more efficient. So using this kind of digital twins to optimize things is kind of our thing. We also look at trading, so energy trading, and being able to use different assets, distributed assets into the market. And then we also look at AI basically in different ways. So you kind of hear that we like digital things. So normally when you would think, somebody says that, okay, we invest in energy tech, it used to be quite heavy. So it used to be something where you need to be blunt to do something. What we want to bring into the market is to take all these things where the startups are the best to change the world. And typically those things are agile things and built on software. So that's the world where I see us going. And I think that's it.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Terhi. I'll open the floor for questions in a moment, but let me maybe start, take the privilege of the facilitator to ask the first question. Monica, you talked about the path and that shit hits the fan every now and then. How did you, as a fast-growing company, find the balance between having that guiding North Star, building the guardrails, having this resilience that you build up, but at the same time having that agility and speed to navigate these roadblocks and these main topics?
Yeah, that's a very broad question, but I would like simple answer. It is really about how we work. So as I said, with the background of the compliance that we have, the like understanding of what we are doing, and then when things actually arise, I said, give me any company, startup or scale up, that had the pandemic as a risk, first of all, and their operative risk, Excel, and then that it was like probability was high and impact was high. Like, please raise a hand. I don't think even the banks had that on that level. They were more probably about the Panama Papers or something like that. But that's of course, so to adapt to that. But for us, it was more about, since the core was to scale, and we knew that we are a SaaS company, so we do payment as a service, enable the payments, and we need to talk about Virta definitely later, but let's talk about that. And mobility as a service, we have customers like Maas Global and Transfer in the Netherlands. So we are flexible in also who runs what and where it's built. But it is about having processes. So we have these cycles and calendar things, which can be sometimes like, oh my God. But what that happens is, like Petri said, you need to know where you are. And if you only come every day to work, like I'm gonna awesome crazy shit and I'm gonna pivot here and there and everywhere, you lose sight of what you have. So, having the systematic way, even though it feels like, oh fuck, again this risk assessment meeting. But of course, since we do payments, we need to have audit trail. And I think one of the good things to remember is that funding, the first rounds are the hardest, and then it becomes hard in a different way. But the more money you take in, the more compliance is required. So when we did now our Series C round, where we got 6 term sheets on the table and 4 offers to be bought up, we decided, and also I think it's about decided when you go into something. So we decided in February of last year that in August we start the funding round. So we give us time to just work, focus, work. Focus is a good word that we use a lot, and not me that much, but Denise like, Monica, yes, but focus. And I said, okay, fine. And then I focused. And then came August, and we had decided that we're gonna have all the stuff done by December. So by December, we're gonna have the funding run completed. We had no idea who would be the investor. But we have met everyone and everywhere, so networking matters. So in August, we started building the roadmap. So what do we need funding for? Because it's not for operative things, it's about the growth. So global scale, going towards the IPO. What is the next phase? And then we put that on paper, and then we started producing the materials to make it so that someone who doesn't understand what we do, because the investors, and now I'm not talking about Terhi, but in general, people are fintech specialist investors, but they have no idea what they're actually doing. And I think that has also now been a bit corrected, because I lived the hype, the telco boom. So I've seen what happens when the money runs out. But after that, we decided it, and then a lot of things happened, and we closed on the 6th of December. We came out. And that was like, for a Finn, that's an awesome feeling to come out with our investment round. And then the funny thing was, like, it was apparently one of the biggest rounds in the fintech industry, like actual financial technology. And it was the biggest round in the Nordic, or probably even bigger when it comes to female founders. So that was like as I said, I like winning. So that was, that's nice. But that's how we work.
Cool, congratulations. Really, really great story. Terhi, follow-up question to that. From an investor point of view, you talked about agility and that you're working with startups for the agility part. How important is it for you when you evaluate a company, when you look at a company, but also when you work with a company, that the company has this long-term vision, that they have this strategic roadmap where they're going, exactly as Monica pointed out, versus being able to pivot, being able to work agile?
We tend to invest in a phase when the product market fit is clear. So I think that for us, we always look at 2 horizons at the same time, so long term and the short term. And typically what we would be looking at is, of course, you need to have a clear vision of purpose so that you're actually doing something which matters. And when you do something which matters, then you can actually make a good business out of it. So the fundamentals in the vision side. And then on the other hand, you need to be very clear, focused on executing the following year. So if you bring the money today, you need to know what do you do in May, what do you do in June, and what are the milestones you need to hit with the money. So basically being clear on, if the vision is here, what are your milestones, and then understanding the milestone clearly. So as somebody was saying, we don't invest operations, we invest into hitting the next milestone. And then when you're clear on what that milestone is and what does it take to get there, then we have something what is investable for us. And then if you do that in a smart way, so that you have the long term, you have the short term, and especially what I think many times being quite honest. So it's like 2 things. So you need to be intellectually doing your work properly. So not ignoring the competition and just hit something which you haven't planned. So you need to really do your homework. But then at the same time, none of the ideas is going to make you money. It's the execution, what you do on a daily basis. And the balance of those 2 is super important. So you need both of them at the same time, all the time. So that's it.
Can I give a tip, actually? Because now when you open, I think the thing that I didn't know, since I came from the financial industry, And I had never been to Slush because that's kind of, I didn't feel that was for me. I've been now and the after parties. I think that's definitely for me. And we've been with Jessica to Singapore, and that's definitely for us. But one thing that I get questions are like, but why didn't you take in more money? Why didn't you take in more money? And then the answer is like, why would I take in more money? Because there is no such thing as free money. So taking in the money that you need for the next 20 months, because you need to have the plan for the investor to say that give me this amount of money, this is my long-term goal, but for next 18 months I will focus on execution on this, and this is what I need the money for. They will try to push you, or they will try to push more money on you, but that's because they want to control you. And as a founder, you don't want to be controlled, and definitely I don't. So for the next round, again, you just take so much that you don't dilute too much, and you retain control. That's why I'm also the chairman of Enfuse. So I need to make sure that my investors are aligned.
Very good point, thanks. Petri, the word strategy is a big word. And it's a very difficult word at times, specifically in the startup environment. I've very often heard, like, yeah, strategy is something for the big companies. It's like done every year, it's 6-month cycles. We don't do that. We are more ad hoc. We need to live in the moment. From your point of view, I mean, we talked a lot about many elements of the strategy. What are the elements of the strategy, but also what has to change in the mindset of startups, but also VCs, CVCs, PEs, to leverage that tool that's called strategy in the right way, and basically make sure that what Monica and Terry said is really then put into action?
Well, that's a big question. Thank you for that. Yeah, I agree with you. That kind of reminded me of a recent project we did for a corporate who kind of saw an opportunity in an unexplored area to disrupt, create a completely new service, completely new business model there. And we got the opportunity to work with them, and that was great. And the first thing we did, we spent half a day with their key people drafting out what we called hypothesis. So we did not talk about strategy or anything like that. We kind of took a napkin and we drew out the key components of this business idea. And that kind of was what we started with. That was kind of what we, at that point of time, called our strategy. Then that napkin looked so good that we decided together to do a proper strategy project on it. So we spent a month or two on outlining. It was more, I would say, just shooting holes into the napkin, just making sure that the high-level idea was solid. So we started looking at the key components, like, is there a place for this thing in this world of ours? Do we actually have the ability to create a uniquely differentiated value proposition that nobody can deliver, and that is actually solving a valuable problem for a specific customer segment? Doing all that sort of thing. And then we also looked at, are these guys, do they have the right to win? Are they in a position to actually win in this game? Can they combine the capabilities required to deliver that unique value proposition? So in a way, and then we kind of created the business model, we put in the numbers, we kind of defined the service offering and so forth. So to me, that was a good example of a strategy in a kind of startup concept or context where you start with, and my takeaway from that is that I'd like to emphasize the importance of that napkin. The hypothesis and the idea of a group of people understanding that there is a place for a thing in this world of ours, and then be really fit for purpose on what is for that specific napkin. What are the sort of elements of the traditional strategy tool set that you need to apply just to make sure that you don't shoot it full of holes and invest into something that is not feasible. So hypothesis, I'll emphasize that. And that's also for the growth journey a key thing, because once you're exploring an unknown territory, you don't have a line of sight. Like, we don't see to Espoo from here. It's cloudy and stuff like that. But we kind of, the hypothesis might say that it's a good place for us to get to. And then you map out your journey based on your hypothesis, your travel plan, and then you kind of make sure that okay, the first corner is to turn to Länsiväylä and so forth. So be dynamic, and if Länsiväylä happens to be blocked, as it may be, then you also, the hypothesis will give you guidance as to what to do there. So I don't know if that is at all in the line of your question, but that's my thoughts on that.
Perfect. Thanks, Petri. Monica, you had a comment.
Yeah, thank you for being so complicated. Yes. But you actually got to the point in the end. Yes. It's a Google Maps. Strategy is just a map. So if you don't have the purpose, so you don't know what the fuck you're doing, that's the napkin. So you agree on what you're supposed to be doing, and then you put in the route that you think, and that's the hypothesis. So I thought that I was coming here this morning from Nurmijärvi, where I live, and I was like, shit, do I take Mekelininkatu or do I take Mannerheimintie? And that was my hypothesis, that Mannerheimintie would probably be a better fit. So I chose that. If I would have had to change, I would have had many opportunities to change. And that's where you need to just remember that those are the pivots. So what we have are maps. We have the purpose, we know what we're doing and where we're going. And then we have the business strategy, which is the map about what are we actually doing, like the numbers and all that. Then we have the product strategy, which is about how do we do what we're supposed to be doing. Because, of course, we need to re-engineer, we need to run in cloud, there are on-prem. There are a lot of compliance required changing. So that map has to be there. Then we have the marketing strategy about how do we tell the awesomeness that we are. But they need to be all the time synced. So on an operative level every day, and that's where the OKRs come in, like that you have tools to key in the, so again, if you think about strategy as the Google Maps, if you don't have fingers, you need Siri, so you can have voice control. But that's the thing that it is, and it needs to be aligned. And I've done my executive MBA at Hanken School of Business, and I think Patrik Furu, he really nailed it. So I've been in bank management teams talking about strategy map and the business canvas and all those things that give me just stress reactions, because it's like, let's go into a room and let's force ourselves to think it. So yes, I agree that you need to do it, but what Patrik did was that he took in a team, an orchestra of people playing different instruments that hadn't been playing before, and then he put the song in front of them. So the purpose, what are we doing? And then he said, play it. And it sounded like shit. They were all professionals, but it didn't really sync. And then he took the conductor in, who said, went and talked to everyone, bam, 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 me, 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 and then this is the composition that we're gonna do. And that's when I understood what strategy is. That it is to get everyone aligned, doing their part to get to where you're supposed to be. And having any other words for it is just a way to get money when you're consulting.
Cool. Thanks, Monica.
You're welcome.
Can I comment on that? I loved it. I loved it.
You're welcome. You can choose it. 200 € tunti sitten.
Just one comment on that. We kind of the Google Map thing, because we kind of were working on how do we make a tool for strategy, and we've played around with that, and then in the end we realized, heck, this already exists. It's Google Maps.
Exactly.
So absolutely agree.
Yeah, and now you have an actual person using it as a successful startup. So that's it is. You hit the point, but all the diba-daba in before, people fell asleep and started looking at their phones.
Yes. That's why we are called consultants.
Yeah. To con and insult, I used to be one at Capgemini in the past millennium.
Any questions? Otherwise, I'll go on with my list. Okay, it's a very Finnish room, no questions.
And of course, we love each other with Petri, even though it was the first time we met, because we appreciate each other's competence.
Love at the first sight.
Yes, exactly.
Good. Yeah.
How do you see like the founding team and basically the core team? How did you kind of evolve during that phase? I know, in your story, I guess you're with the same founder team still.
Because we have Hotel California as our theme. You can check out any time you like, but until I say, you can't leave. And that's called a SHA, Shareholders Agreement.
From the competencies point of view, like how do you see that?
Do you want to continue?
No, but if you have insights, please shoot.
Well, I'm a consultant, so
Exactly.
so I can talk about it. Like you said,
And I've done it.
those who teach
Yes.
and so forth.
Yes.
Anyway, I think it's a very good question. So, from my perspective, and I by the way, I do have some experience also
Yeah,
with real companies. So the way I've seen things is that it depends, obviously. Like if your team is such that they can kind of shift mindset throughout the different cycles, then no problem. But many times you may see these like pelle pelottomat in Finnish,
Yes.
like who are the product people, the solution people who are terrible at scaling.
Yes.
So be mindful of that. I think that is exactly, look at the stage you're in, look at your team, and then determine what you need to do. Can you switch the mindset? It may be even beneficial just to force some new insight into your team.
Yes.
Because then you can shake things up.
And maybe still like continuing from there. So when you're very honest about what you're good at and what you're not good at, and understanding the phase, so going back into where your kind of style works the best, that's the whole importance, because you are there for the company. That's what you want to build. So it's also understanding that like in the early phases, you might need to control everything, but if you were to do that in her phase, then it would be completely, you would be failing the whole company, because that would not work. Some people, of course, grow along that journey, but not everybody. And some people even don't want to grow because they like being peloton or whatever. So that's their style. So then if you are really honest about what you're good at, what your team is good at, so that you're complementing, what you need to bring in along the way so that you become even stronger as a team, and then think of what's best for the company. That's what's so important about being a founder.
Don't build a company with friends, because you will not survive. Definitely don't build company with relatives, then you're just fucking stupid. But if I look at us, we were 5 totally different people. I wouldn't want to work with someone like me all the time. I'm kudos to Denise, because she's been doing it for so long. So what we are now is yin and yang, and there have been very many really hard times. And if you are building everything on friendship and stuff, you won't last. So the purpose for all of us is to build a company. So we have the owner's will. So when the 5 of us sat down, I didn't call Niklas, our CTO, and say, Niklas, do you want to become the CEO? Let's build something. Because I knew that he doesn't have that capabilities, and he knew that he doesn't either. So in the beginning of time, that's how we did. We were totally different, so we all had a purpose, and our purpose together jointly was Enfuse and Enfuse mission, and then we had the owner's will. So we sat down and decided what kind of company do we want to be, and what kind of money do we take in and what we don't. So there are people that we haven't taken in money for, because we just said we don't work with that kind of people. But now, since we are growing, we need to get in different kind of people, because if we just take in corporate-minded people, it will kill us. So you need to have balls also to try out. And then also the fact that many people want to join a startup because it's so inspiring. Monica, you're so inspiring. But then they can't handle the pressure, because we are all there to succeed for the mission of Enfuse. And it's fine to not know that we have had some, churn, if you put it like that. Both, motivated churn and self-understood churn. And that's important. Because if you have the same people, having same people doing the same stuff, you can't do awesome shit. So you need to have the balls to change. So no friends.
That's a good point. I also wanted to add one thing, because founders, they run the risk of developing this tunnel vision. Like you are in the bunkers, you are hung up with your vision, and you kind of believe in it, even too much sometimes. Yep. So one of the tool sets that you can use, make sure that your board provides you with an objective vision and guidance and that sort of thing.
And that ain't gonna happen.
That's difficult, obviously.
That ain't gonna happen. There are 2 types of board member, harmless and harmful. And that's David Hindrikus, the founder of TransferWise, told me. So all love to my board members, but they know it. It's not like this comes as a surprise. But it's very hard to find, because what you are doing then is you're taking in co-founder type of things, and then you are risking. They are there to protect their investment, because they are investing in the purpose. So I hear you. I heard that a lot. Never seen it happen. Never talked to a founder that said that they actually have it.
Maybe I would challenge that when I was a founder, and I would say the other way around. So what is the hard thing about being a founder is that you are so deep in your shit all the time. So it's sometimes important to have the possibility to do take the helicopter perspective on things and see what really does it make sense? Are we doing the right things? So they are having that kind of sparring partner. So none of the boards could ever be the ones who are better experts in your shit. So you know your stuff, and that's the whole thing why they are investing in the first place. But then at the same time, having that opportunity to take a little bit of the outside perspective on things is very healthy.
Definitely, I agree. But that is not what was mentioned, because that would be a systematic way, an expectation. That are advisory boards and stuff like that. So as a board member and a founder owner, so I'm an owner first and foremost of Enfuse, and then I appointed myself as the chair because I still can, and then I appointed myself as the co-CEO because I can. And I understand that someday that won't happen, and actually I am looking forward to that day, because that is the day when my skill sets aren't enough, but I will always remain the owner or the founder. So that's why, of course, you need to have those discussions. But remember, again, it's systematic. It's not like, don't go into a board meeting where the investor or the board member has the 45 minutes, if they sit in 30 other boards, to be fully aligned and inspire you. That ain't gonna happen. Find an advisory board.
So we need to wrap up, unfortunately. I would like to ask all of you a final question, and please a short answer to that question, specifically based on the last point that we discussed. Skills, capabilities. We have two different groups of people here, founder, investor, more the consulting view. And I'm personally convinced there's a role for all of these in the process, because they have different perspectives. And Monica, you mentioned subcontractors,
yeah,
partners.
we use a lot of consultants because they come in with spec knowledge. You know, they help us with the things that we understand that we need help with. And I don't want to hire them for long term. No, just kidding.
Yes. Yeah. So how do you see the roles? If we start, how do you see the role of the investor compared to the founder, compared to the ecosystem around it? How do you help startups in your portfolio? What's your role? What's the role you're taking in helping them along that way?
I think the investor, if you think about what is the investor doing, so why do they come in the first place, it is actually the company which is the product of the investor. So investor always comes in with the mind that they can add value, or the company can be accelerated so that it can be sold with a higher price. So the perspective could be quite different from the founder's perspective. And what do? You keep the value creation in mind, and you keep the milestones in mind. And what in practice that could be is bring your networks so that they can find more customers, bring your expertise so that you can get co-investors who come in the team and add value, and add even more networks so that you get this circle to go, so that you can actually supercharge the development of the company even faster than they could do alone with your networks as capabilities. But that's more or less it.
Yeah, and I agree. And like Maria 01 is a good example of exactly what that is, because what we need to remember also is that there are different phases of investors. So if the hardest money to get in is the A round or seed or whatever, those are the investors that needs to work the hardest, because they have the least amount of money, because they often have very small funds, which means that they need to be very particular, and they will come in and help you. But then when you start going into, the bigger, and then it's always the 10x multiple minimum that they're expecting, or even more. So then it becomes a difference. So I think it's good for a founder to also understand that you will have different types of board members going forward, and somewhere the bigger investors will buy out the smaller ones, for example. So it's a life journey, but you as a founder need to know and control it as much as you can, because otherwise you will not meet everyone's expectation, and least of all your own.
Perfect. Petri.
Yeah, I think my view is that you asked about consultants' role. So maybe I'll respond to that. So my feeling is that, and my experience is that startups, especially early stage startups, they don't really need the traditional consulting tool set because they are more focused on their place in the world, getting the napkin in place. And my personal experience is also such that the startups that I've ended up investing in or being part of, they have been where I've been kind of involved as a consultant, but I've actually been sucked into this whole napkin thing and become actually part of the team because I don't apply the consulting tool set that we would apply for corporates. I apply a slightly different tool set, and I'm kind of as a kind of co-founder kind of a profile. So, but I think us consultants, we do have some tool sets, and that becomes helpful when you start validating things and stuff like that. Yeah. So that's my perspective. We got to blend in. It's not like a startup and a consultant. It's more like a condensed team. That's very important. Fit for purpose.
Yeah. Let me quickly repeat the question because I'm not sure if you were able to hear that in the back. So the question was, if you, as a startup, you need sparring, you need expertise, you need to bring a consultant in, what is the best way of doing that? Are there tips and tricks what to consider and how to choose the right consultant?
References. So talk with your peers. Listen, and it's all about people. Everywhere, like we're a sauce. People buy from people. References matter. So sometimes you could get something cheaper, but paying for cheap shit when you don't have money will be disastrous. Or paying even worse, a lot of money for shit, it will be even more disastrous. So I think my tip is really like this scenario where you have companies that I hope are vetted, that they don't come here to fist you. So start with here and ask for your peers. And then, of course, you need to know what you want to buy. So you can't buy ever the reason for your existence, but you can definitely buy tax consulting. And I think one thing that hits me as an advice also is like, I don't know, Lexi I saw was here, and I don't know if you have any tax company or whatever, but as a founder, especially these days, when you own your company shares, do it through a holding company. Because if you don't, then you have problems when things start going well.
Cool. Unfortunately, I think we're pretty much out of time, but let's maybe have two more questions. First, in the back, I think you raised your hand first.
My question was for Monica. How did you decide to bypass the Finnish market and launch or target another market coming from Finland?
Yeah, exactly because of that. I knew that Finns won't buy from Finns, and that's a cultural misfit. That's how it is. Finnish banks, compliance people. If you think about our prospect customers, especially when we were born to help banks and financial institutions. I used to be that CIO. I'm a recovering bank CIO, and what that means is that they think that everything is done better outside of Finland, and that's the biggest mistake the Finns have, because we are supposed to be the happiest nation in the world. We are the least corrupt. We have clean air. We are trustworthy, open, and transparent. But we don't fucking buy from each other. So I knew that if I focus on the Finnish market, I'm gonna die. And focusing on the Nordic markets, like I'm still born Swedish in Sweden, Swedish passport, it's boring. Going small is so boring. Then you can have proof of concepts. Like ST1 became our proof of concept, but we did Sweden, Finland, and Norway. We did it the hardest. We did revolving credit, 3 countries, 3 currencies, 2 time zones. So doing it and starting from Finland, it's so amazing in so many levels, but Finns won't buy from Finnish companies. I don't say that never, but in general.
Is that also because of the fintech landscape here being so few?
Yeah, and the reason why the fintech, yeah, exactly. So we were like year 2 the biggest fintech in Finland, and now the only one that is bigger than us on revenue is Voimagol, and they are a prospect customers of ours. So the definition of fintech, and it's another discussion. But that's exactly it, because it was us doing money, and then were all the small ones struggling, and that's called compliance. So if you don't know what you don't know, That's a hard part again. So if you have an awesome idea, shoot the holes in the napkins. Like I am inhorealist. I'm then like, I'm the most excited person, but I am really anal in like, do you really think that that could work? And what about this compliance, and this compliance? And now again, yes, I started to clap, so I think we're running out of money. But I'm still here a couple of minutes, so.
So final question, and then let's wrap it up.
Yeah, I don't have a question. It's a comment about the buying consultancy, especially in early stage startup. My advice and opinion is no, no way.
But you have had bad experiences.
Yeah, spend your money in a business and focus what you are doing, because there are plenty of free and good consultancy available. Like Helsinki City has a new go.
I'll give you an example. Yes.
And we are now in Eastman, Fiban, what is new lead startup or new startup leads accelerator or something. There are accelerators and use your LinkedIn friends. They might help. Depends. And last comment. Sometimes consultancy companies sell cheap consultancy, but it's just a door opening offer that they would like to sell the real money business.
Yeah, but that's the thing, but that you need to understand, because that's how you play the game. So I need a shareholders agreement. I got an idea of Enfuse. I knew that I need to have a good contract. What did I do? Fondia, they are a good legal company. So I called the CEO and said, hey, Morten, I have this idea, I have no money, can you help me? He said, yes. Because then I used him later. So there are no such thing as free lunch. However, if you don't suck, you will always get referrals. So, but the only thing that you need to know is that open your mouth and ask. So if you don't know where you want to go, you will never get there.
Good. Thanks, everyone. Thanks to the panelists, the presenters, Monika, Terhi, Petri. Thanks for all of you to join. And now there's still a little bit of time if you want to ask direct questions from the panelists.
Is it the karaoke and booze now? Yeah, thank you.
I heard they're already preparing lunch, so it might be lunch right away.
But
Thanks a lot,
Friday.
everyone. Have a great day.